This is officially week 3, right? Yeah. Have any of you guys set up Git with using the certificate yet? So you can do use SSH instead of using HTTPS. Okay. That's better to do Git because then if the other person updates, then you only one command away from getting it again. All right. Okay. That one. Right. Do I need any packages to run it? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And which port does it run on? Which port are you serving on? 80 or? Okay. And what are your methods? So you can do
all of the state if you want. Add. Yeah. And remove.
remove. I'll do again once, then I'll go back to state. Alright.
And of course I have to reset them also, but you can reset this one because it's already
It's 9 right now.
Okay.
Okay. It said 10. Alright.
Then I have awful.
Yeah, what's it?
I try something like software.
Yeah.
Or something else. Yeah.
Alright. You have not found. We see the. Okay, yeah. It does give a 404. Yeah, of course, that's the main advantage of setting up status codes, that it's a convention, so all your browsers, yeah, it might not have captured it now because you need to just do it again, but yeah, you can see it. So yeah, all the tools and etc. that you would use while development, they would all flag it immediately. So that's always nice. Right. If we look at your code, okay, maybe, yeah, so.
Just put instructions on the homework, just use those as comments.
Yes. Alright. So this happens each time. Yeah.
That's something that should have been commented
on. What part?
That console.
This?
Commented on.
Yeah, I mean it's fine. Yeah, because you get to see it in your while you're running the server, so you're clear about what's happening. Yeah, you could also even print state before and after each command, so then you know for sure that when the user did an add, okay, that actually happened. Because of course in this case, you're both the developer and you're the user as well, so you don't need to look at the state again in order to verify. But just think if you were hosting this and somebody else was accessing it, then you could still get an idea of what is like, you could do a consistency check about like if your program is doing what it's supposed to do, like basically logging. So what happens often in production setup is that these logs are just piped into a file, and we just call it a .log file, and that's how you understand what was happening at a certain amount of time, a certain point in time with the server. Usually that's why you would also add timestamps to all the things which are happening. And of course, when you have a Linux setup, everything, for example, like most of the processes which run when you switch on the computer, they run as services. And all the services have their own like automatic inbuilt logging setup generally. So you can go and look at the logs for anything from like how the display on your computer is doing to every time you plug in and remove a USB device, to like if you give a print command, to if you have a HTTP server running on the machine, what your browser is doing. Usually you can have logs which are flushed after a while.
I just use JSON stringify, even though we don't need it. Because the right, we just
need to make it into a string. Yeah. I think Ahmed also did the same, and I also told him like this is a very expensive way of converting that.
Okay, this is expensive.
Yeah, because the
You need to process it.
yeah, I mean in this case it might not be so much because I think the system can just figure out what it has to do based on just a simple type of, and type of will reveal it's an integer, so it would probably the JSON stringify would just go, okay, integer is just, yeah, toString.
No, we wouldn't, because I tried it, we just say
No, I mean when you do JSON stringify, if you think how JSON stringify would have been written, it would probably do a type of check. So if it's anything else, you can probably just do toString. Even if it's a string, you can still, quite likely. Otherwise, if it's an object, then you need to iterate and blah, blah, blah. So in this case, it might not be too bad. Yeah. But of course, making it implicitly into a string is always better. So you could, yeah, of course, use template strings over here as well. Also makes it easiest to read. Yeah. You guys understand what's happening here? It's basically you're doing a single operation based on what sort of request you're getting in. It's kind of a nice way to get started with making your own HTTP server. Just clear. Now let's go up. Part to this. All right, so I'll just try that. Fine. Yeah. How should I fix this error? Yeah. Yeah. How do I do that? Yeah. I could do that, and that would fix it just for Babel. But then there might be one more thing which might be missing, and that error would only arrive once I do npm install Babel and then I run Node again, right? How can I install everything at once which this project needs? You haven't been paying attention. This is quite important because otherwise, the Node projects I work on usually have 25 to 30 dependencies which I've installed at least. So if I sent you a piece of code and you kept on going through this process, you'll basically spend half an hour before you can even run it once. So just remember this, that that's the role of the package JSON file. So look, dev dependencies. There's already a list of what this project needs to run. You will have dependencies and dev dependencies. And this is not common to Node in any way. Like once you go to React module and you start using React as a framework, you'll be using Node to build those projects as well. Or if you go to Python, then you'll probably have like an environment and you'll have a requirements.txt file, which will look almost very much the same. The way you install from package JSON is just to do npm install without giving any other argument. That also makes it rather easy to remember. So it's going very fast, but you're seeing that it's installed Babel, it's installed Babel presets, etc., etc. Yeah. Also, okay, that's fine. Now you'll also see that we have a node modules folder, which was I gave you guys generally a git ignore file, so you wouldn't commit it because there's otherwise literally thousands of files in this folder, and git pushing it and git cloning it is gonna be really slow then. So you can ignore. I can show you. Ignore the node modules folder, and then just when you're doing npm install, you do npm install save or npm install save dev, which will put it in the package JSON file. Then you push that, and then when you get it again, you do npm install, and you don't get it from GitHub, or some other place which has your Git, but you get it from Node repositories straight again. Right? There's also one more command which is npm ls. Npm ls. Yeah, which will give you a tree of like everything that is installed. So you can see that even though our project is quite simple, and even though we've only mentioned 2 dev dependencies, those themselves are using dozens of other dependencies themselves. Okay. Yeah, and if let me show you again. So let's say I removed the node modules folder. So we're back to kind of square one. Now it's like we haven't done npm install. I do node dot, it gives an error. If you do npm ls at this point, it shows you that it's empty. No node modules have been installed. And it might sometimes even flag an error if some module was installed but not correctly, that it needed another package, but that's not present there anymore. Get back again with npm install. Okay. Yeah. And again, look at it has installed actually 170 packages, because those how many are needed, and it's a little bit notorious in the case of Node because it's very common to use dozens of packages. You can verify it again by doing npm ls, and then it's constructing a tree, and then and then it will just show you, and it should basically you hope that it terminates cleanly. If there would be any error, it would be at the end of it here. Also, what you have in package JSON are the commands to run the app itself. So,
Because I used npm run start, but never changed everything.
Yeah.
I'm saying it.
Yeah,
For the rest,
I saw that.
I use this one. I mean, I say npm run start. When I say run start, it runs this command line. What Rohit did, he said node dot, which means it should run this part. But that's the wrong path because you need to go into dist first. So I didn't change this part, which is my error.
Also, I think if I do this npm run server, it might not run correctly. Yeah, because now, yeah, also you hadn't saved dev nodemon, so that wasn't installed. Even so, let's do that, like npm save dev nodemon. Npm install save dev, of course. But I think even now, if I try to do npm server, it will switch on nodemon, but nodemon will look back at package.json and it would try to run index.js and it would fail as well. So let's see, npm server, npm run server. Yep, there's no index.js. You can see it clearly. So, yeah, to fix that, yeah, let's open this over here. Go to your package.json and here the switch on here. Yeah, so you could remove it from here because this will be fixed automatically, and just change this guy. So now both of your start and solo commands would look at the right place. So now when we do npm server, or let's do npm start first. Yeah, it's running because now it's running the dist file. Also, yeah, it should be, it just started the node command prompt. Yeah. Yeah, I think it now has the server running. Yeah. Or if you just do npm server run server, then yeah, that should also run. So what's your port again?
88.
88, okay. Right. This is the web server index. Wait. Right. Is that? You didn't set a lower bound? Oh no, that's not.
I'll fix it later on, but
yeah, it's fine for now. Save contact Jeff. How do I find all the contacts? All contacts. Right. Yeah, looks like Jeff has been saved correctly. How did this come to pass? So you're not checking if it's a post request. Yeah.
Because that function is from the request that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes nothing because there's none in the post request.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, if we check out src, we have index. I need to fix this here. Yeah. Okay. but yeah, you could very easily add request dot type, it was, I think, because you see we're printing here request dot method, and we've been printing a get post, so you could very easily add, yeah, you know, yeah, request dot method, yeah, then and only then do that. But that's also something which you would hope that the contact class might take care of. That if you don't supply it a name, it's not fulfilling the conditions of being a contact. They cannot be contacted without a name. It might be without an age, it might be without a phone number. We can decide. But name is definitely, we need it because we can't differentiate between them otherwise.
Would you do that in the context?
Yeah, like because literally your constructor is the place which is trying to figure out which runs when you do a new contact.
Yeah, can you do something like require or something? Because otherwise you can even make a contact without those.
Yeah, there could be different ways of doing this. You could you could add a return, and if it's false, then you know that this contact does not, or you could raise an error. I don't think we haven't done that yet, right? Yeah. You guys have done the try catch error scenario. Yeah. So there's basically, you can also raise an error. You guys know how to handle errors, you just don't know how to create one. We can maybe take a look briefly, or let's see, like, maybe I shouldn't be minimizing it. Yeah. So if you do JavaScript raise error, yeah. So okay, so this is true in JavaScript now. Yeah. So you can yeah, basically look, this is a constructor. This is exactly the case that we're thinking about. Or this is not a constructor actually. Yeah, this is just a function. But yeah, like it would work. You would try to do a new something, and in this case, it's checking that both of them need to be numbers, because width and height need to be numbered if it has to do this computation. If not, then you throw an error.
Okay. So at the beginning of your class, you have that line, and those 3 lines, 2, 4, 2, 4, and after that you have a constructor.
So let's see, if we go over here and we do, yeah, I mean, you could do it any place, but you could inside constructor. Yeah. So if basically not, yeah, object, basically you should also check if you have been supplied an object, because if you then try to do object.name and there exists no object, you'll get an error before that even. So actually this should have even created an error. But I think maybe like the function, the post function, basically it's supplying an empty object. Yeah. So the object is there, but it's empty, so it doesn't create an error. Or if not object.name, then we do a throw, and you can see it's a keyword because it's been highlighted as red. Name is needed to create a new person. This should be, I think this should be fine. Yeah. You can check it in the browser quickly. Just copy it, take it over here. you can do, you can of course just open a nice console over here, paste the class, and then we do new contact. Raises an error. We do a new contact. Empty object still raises an error. We give it a name. Of course, we didn't check if the name is empty, which kind of beats the point of doing this validation. Okay, it's still this. Oh yeah, because not actually. Because the test we are doing is basically, if you see this, right? This is the test we're doing, that returns a true, so that will flag an error. So somehow, I'm still not having the intention of, but we have somehow managed to create a. So this won't, then that means this shouldn't flag an error, right? To Joe over there. Yeah, then it creates a new person and returns you that. So it's a pretty simple way of, yeah. So
I have a question to the code.
Mm-hmm.
Index.js.
Mm-hmm.
Line 27.
Mm-hmm.
It says request.on.
Mm-hmm.
What is that on?
This is like, yeah, it's basically like that. So request has a start, request has an end, and like also when you're doing a streaming data upload, so you also has request on chunk. That's what is happening. I think we're doing a request on request on data. Yeah. So this is like, the data is arriving in small packets. It's not arriving, because the thing is like the technology is built so that it would work for the smallest transmission of data or the largest. A post can handle, I don't know, in theory, like it could handle a 1 TB upload. If your server is good enough, if your server doesn't care, it will be like fine. You will need to go and boost up nodes limits, but it will handle it. But it can't just like the internet doesn't work like that. When you're sending it over the net, you're still sending it in very small packages because that's efficient. Also, that lets you figure out resume upload of things, because then you can start from whatever was the last packet index that you were dealing with, etc. Right? So
example is also when you're talking in phone.
Yep.
There's also small data packages people are sending.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you hear a voice changing, it's because the data package didn't get all of the.
So that's actually especially when you're speaking over WhatsApp, sometimes the order isn't correct. So something is switches for just brief milliseconds, and that's what creates weird sounds. Or sometimes there's just loss. So it doesn't care. It's on the other end. It's basically doing this on data. Even if some packets in between didn't arrive, it can't care less, and it just goes on. But for some other things, like if you uploading a file, that's not acceptable, because even though it might be slow, you need the file to be uploaded exactly. So there are several ways of figuring out. One way is like you analyze the file and create a hash, and then you say, okay, if the file arrives correctly to you, and then if you analyze it, then it will also create the same hash because you're using the same algorithm. That's one way. Another way is you can use some protocols which, like TCP, which HTTP is also built on top of. That is a blocking protocol. So if the packets aren't arriving in order, it will not resume. It will block it and wait for the correct packet to arrive, because it will arrive eventually. Hopefully, infrastructure works very well, and it will not do something. But when you're dealing with voice and chat and stuff like that, you usually use UDP, for example. And UDP is it doesn't care. It will just get packets, whichever are arriving, as quickly as possible, and then just give it to you as fast. That's why it's more suited for like voice. You don't care if like the signal is, replicated exactly. You care that, there's as little time as possible, between you saying and the other person hearing it. It's not like you're gonna use these things tomorrow, but it's good to know that, that's the underlying layer of what you're dealing with.
I use it for
UDP? Yeah. Okay.
because I want the signal to come as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Because you read the signals,
Yeah.
you have to move your finger on the screen to right and left, so you just need the signal as fast as possible.
What is the QX?
Where, sir? Which line? Oh yeah. So this I didn't explain you guys in class, but that's like you've seen like how the form data looks like when you send it. So like so it looks like basically a query string. This part, you guys know this part, right? Yeah. So when the data comes in, it looks like this thing. It doesn't arrive as a JavaScript object, because if you remember, like if you want to send objects, then you make a JSON request, like you did jQuery.getJSON, for example, or in XML HTTP request, JSON, like you can say that, type JSON there. Okay. But we're not doing that. We're using the most default way of handling the form. What was the request for seeing the ad? No, no, just getting the form. Okay, that's just index HTML. Yeah, just like a very simple form. So this will send a query string. You can also change the form to send you JSON instead as well. That's possible these days, I think, with HTML5. But we were sending a query string, so this, sorry, this line was just to pass body into an object. So I mean, you don't need both of them. Simplify. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The constant body already exists. I don't want to. Yeah. What about object? And then you're basically doing object.name, object.age. Also, kind of doesn't make sense if you're going to recompose it after all. So you could just pass this object. Sorry. Yeah, pass this object directly. Of course, doesn't make much sense to only declare a variable if you're only going to use it one time. So you could just do qs.parse inside here as well. I'm just going to leave it for readability purpose. So, but yeah, that's what it's doing. I can also show you how that works. Yeah. Oh yeah, but the thing is, the page is going to change. But let's see if we're somehow able to intercept it. Name it. Let's try doing the blank one now, right? Because we changed our contact. So we should get a contact. Oh yeah. So the thing is, like, that request we weren't able to see because it has already gone. Yeah, with this, I just wanted to show you like how it looks like the request body. It would look pretty much like this thing, except of title you'll have name is equal to what's it?
If you do a search in Google, you can see the
Yeah.
console log before
there's a lot of things going on here because Google is also sending what it imagines your IP in your location. But yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's a lot of other things. Yeah, it's also probably sending an API key, which is using internally. Right. Yeah. So that was that part. I don't know if did we actually save the contact file? Yeah, it looks saved. Should we see if yeah, you can see that the name and age were saved as empty. Didn't raise an error, which is a little bit. Let's see. So add one.
Yes, can I see contact list? Contact list?
Yeah.
Maybe you should put and not or in the constructor.
What, sorry?
We should put and not or because we passed an object. When you call the contact.
Sorry, didn't understand.
When you call the contact in the index, you pass an object. So you should put and here, not or.
No,
Or
yeah, this
because
it should create an error in either case. So this is going to be true if the object doesn't exist. Then it won't go to this. Yeah. So it's basically the reverse of if object and object name. So you need not object or not object name because when you're inverting the and, you will get an odd instead. I would have hoped. Okay, contact instance. You're just doing an add contact. This should have created an error, but
why? You're still getting the name is just empty.
Yeah, but when we checked the empty name in the console, it did create an error. Yeah, we'll figure it out later. But yeah, so the new method that you added was basically the all contacts, right? So this is the homework part, which is like, okay, yeah. Sorry?
I changed it at the end because normally you just want to send this part out and then you use the context.html to show it. But I couldn't show it because it wouldn't save XML.
Yeah, like it was two parts. One is to create this, and second is to use this in the context.html.
I still didn't need to make this photo. I should just say dot write contact list and press that.
Yeah,
that would be enough.
Let's test it. So you're saying just doing rest dot write
Contacts. Sorry, JSON. Stringify.
Yeah. This should be enough. Let's check it. To refresh now. Yeah, works fine.
No, because you have to go out of the server and restart it. This should be in 1 line.
Yeah, but this is the But
need to restart the server. Members,
yeah, but if you just a second, if you do a save, yeah, it is restarting because I'm running node mode.
oh yeah.
Although yeah, I'm also surprised why it's not being why is it not being shown as a JSON error? Yes, contact list. Because we're not running a watch. That's why also the contact thing didn't work. Yeah, I should have known better. But no, not. But yeah. Gosh. So going to desktop. 3. Was it npm run build? No, I need to get into part 2 first. Part 2 npm run watch. So now we'll actually see the changes that we made. No, you keep on. Now when we refresh that, unhandled promise rejection. There seems like there was some error, and we haven't done catch over here. Let's say catch error. The thing is that you can't just do only console log because you have to also return something back to the user as well, right? So this, what is the status code? Yeah, it's equal to, let's say 500 rest.write internal server data, the most generic sort of response in this case, and we do rest of end.
That's interesting because I'm getting an error. I don't have a catch. I don't have a catch.
Yeah. So, but you could see that. Yeah, now we got it. Yeah, because the thing is, now the two empty ones which we have in our JSON, when you try to do load tries to make them into a contact flips out like, okay, how did you create an empty, and so it proves that our logic actually works fine. Yeah. So what we need to do in this case is like go in and manually delete the two records which. Yeah, we could also do that. That's why I kept it in the first place. Context JSON. Okay, that works fine. Now we go to our index HTML. We try and create an empty this time. It crashed our whole server because it wasn't handled very well. So you can see that the server just died over here. So we'll need to go in index.js. In add contact, we'll need to handle this case. So we'll do a try. And then catch error. So we'll say, okay, try to do this thing. If there's an error, then console log error. Remember, this is a server. You need to finish whatever you were doing at this point. So you would also do the same. If the status code is equal to, this time it's not our fault. This time it's the user's fault. So we'll give a 400 series error. Let's just say 401. We'll just go through the Wikipedia for what the status code means. We do best.try error. Yeah, best.try error. And we just do best.try. So actually, if you type to refresh, yeah, submit, you actually get an error quite nicely. And just like think about it for a second, because the error message does not come from anywhere in the server logic. It actually comes from your class. So that's the way of, like, if you do things nicely, connect things on top of each other, it will actually reduce your work. Because if you're not raising the error over here, then you need another way of like figuring out within the server logic, okay, what type of error are we looking at? And then you need a if statement there. Okay, if it is this kind of error, then send this message back. If it is that kind of error, send that message back. And right now we're so confident in our application logic that we say, I'm just going to pass the error. Like there's only one kind of error which is possible at that stage. So we go back. Right after end. And this happened because what I told you I didn't follow. I should do a return here. So the function finishes here. Because the thing is, it actually didn't finish. It did res end, then it tried to do something else, and then it tried to do whatever right later on, or maybe with a catch. Yeah. See, yeah. So now if we refresh this, now we do empty. Now our server doesn't die because we're finishing that request right over there. And just do back. Now whatever JSON, because we love JSON, right? Submit error string contact. Sorry. Yeah, I received, but the mistake in this case is that this is declared here, so it's not visible actually outside. So actually, then we can't do const. We need to do let. You do it over there. I mean, the other way would be that you take all this code and put it underneath in this try, but then you're not helping yourself in the future. This is much better. You see, procedurally, it could die over here, it could die over here, and not inside of each other. Try and keep your code as shallow as possible. Life is much better that way. So we do reload. Okay, it's saved, because actually when you're doing post request and if you do refresh, you can keep on creating new data, because your browser is basically it doesn't just try and load the end page, it actually tries to make the whole request which happened in order to arrive at this page. So be wary, if we do refresh a few times here, you'll have lots of JSONs H26 because we don't do uniqueness comparison as well. So then we have all contacts, and we should see, we see a proper array. The users are there.
Can I see the code? Well, yeah, why do you use adding string codes to the list file?
You could do dot list as well, contacts dot list. That works fine as well. And that's only. This is a bit tricky. Why is there two thens over here? Why don't you just do?
And our resolution, I don't have these. I only have one. You can remove the first one. Just remove the first one. Then you have the second.
You can console log it. It's fine. Fine. Okay. So if you can't, what's the if? Okay.
Yeah, I want to show it on the context.html.
Yeah, this is needed.
Use this one.
Yeah, you can't use it in Node, but I mean, you needed to create a new HTML file in the public folder, and that is outside Node territory because.
How to just make it?
Okay.
You still need to public it.
Okay. I'll just show you guys briefly how that would be done. So we go into public, new file, let's say contacts dot contacts dot HTML. Do a save. Okay. First, we need to make the request, right? Sure. We will conveniently use the fetch, and the request should be basically it is a top level request. So I have explained it in the JavaScript 3. I don't know. Yeah. So fetch all contacts. Then we needed to do some, I think, JSON parse or something. Yeah. Let's see about that. Then let's say console log. Let's just try this much first. If this does anything at all. Yeah, because that's what this is.
If you just write JSON parts, it knows automatically that you have to do it on your
Oh, sorry.
If you go back to your code, when you say fetch to the then JSON parse, then the JSON parse something it has to run on what it gets.
But I'm not sure, like I think I'll need to look up the syntax again because it's quite new and I haven't used it so many times. So we do contacts dot HTML instead. Yeah, we got an error. So unexpected token. Oh, yeah. Let's look at the JavaScript. Let's look at the ambient fetch. Fetch method, making fetch request, and then oh yeah, the maybe you should do it. Yeah, return. So what's it using? Response. Yeah. So response response.blog. I think instead of response.blog, it will be response.json in this case. Yeah, okay. Now we have proper objects. So, I mean, then you can go from here. Yeah.
But you can also use the XML HTTP request.
Yeah, that would also work. But as you can see, it uses promises. So, you know.
Normally, you wouldn't put the JavaScript code in, wouldn't you just put it in and then make your
No, you could.
index field?
Yeah, you could. I mean,
Like, just like we did with the index.xml, and we could make the context.xml and then put the code in there.
yeah, but the thing is, like, in this case, we are still not, you know, doing like very reactive components. So when you add index HTML, when you press, you know, like submit, it actually moves somewhere else. And then, you know, then you could basically arrive at the all contacts, and then you could see all of them rendered from here. There's a lot of different ways. You could also make the same request within index.html and render that. But then when you press submit, then wiring it so that the contact also appears over here, that might be slightly complicated right now. I don't know if you guys did that in JavaScript too, because you were working with APIs back then, right? Yeah. So basically, you could do it on. Oh, okay. On the same page, did you like have a form?
Like, you have a search bar, and then you type something in and you press search, and under the search you can get
Yeah, but still the thing is like the HTML page is being reloaded, though. So that's the, if you kept it only in index.html, then you would need to figure out a way how to not make it move to some other place. So you would need to change what the form does, the action, you would need to change it. You would actually need to, when you press submit button, instead of, you know, you would say that, okay, don't actually go somewhere else, the action of the form. No, actually call this JavaScript function. And you would let the function make the XML HTTP request with the contact object to the add contact, then get the response, and then render it underneath. So it will get.
because we were reloading the same page.
Yeah. So you could do that with all contacts. You could just keep it open in 2 tabs, and that's okay for now. Because I think it's kind of, you would be doing a lot of like the magic linking, completing the circle thing in React anyway. So might as well just wait for that. That's the request which we were seeing before. This is all contacts request. So now, yeah, this page is just fetching it, and now you can imagine that once you have the data here, then you can render it in whatever HTML way that you want. Right.
I find it interesting that you don't have to run the whole path.
Yeah, because it's on the same domain.
Okay.
Because the localhost 8080 path is implied, and you should actually never write the whole path, because you know you're, think of it like when you create, like now we're basically creating a whole application, right? and your application URL might change. You don't want that each time you're hosting it at a different place that you need to go into every single file and change every single request. This is very portable because this will change. This implies that it's the same domain as what the HTML file is on. You guys have any questions about what we did now? You can see the all contacts part. This was the homework file. Yeah.
Can I see the chunk? The chunk you made?
What's it? Yeah. Okay. So this was the add contact part, right?
What's going on here behind the scene?
Yeah. This is like when you're receiving data, you don't receive it all at once. So you have to wait. So you subscribe to events on the request the same way you do button.click. But you do request on data and request on end. And then you get data bit by bit. Then you compose it together, and then you use that to interpret what you actually receive, the total thing. This is a little bit verbose, and you could already think that, if this is something like, if you have an app, it will have several post speakers probably. You could like think of like the JSON API that you guys worked with at the end of JavaScript 3, where you had like, the users, posts, articles, blah, blah, blah. If you were creating that API yourself, that you would probably need a post method for all of those resources. And then you would need to do this whole sort of logic in each one of them, which is fine. It's not too bad, but it's a little bit verbose. What we'll do today is get a bit more understanding of REST APIs and then use Express. And using Express would be sort of going from this code, taking whatever this does exactly into something like a syntax, which will make more sense. And then you'll see the value of using libraries, for example. Body is when you make a request, it has like a URL, it has headers, and body is where you put the data of the thing. So when the form request is being made, so the URL is like, where am I sending this data to? The headers would say, okay, this belongs to this or this belongs to that sort of information. We're not doing it yet. And then the body would contain the actual data. The name is this, age is this, etc., etc.
If you did that, will you use the same just add context?
Yeah. This is universal. I mean, even if you created an A tag, right? Let's do that. It's the same thing. Yeah. So we go forward, refresh, all contacts. Look, it's the same thing. Whatever works there works here too. It will take you to this place, right? So, but yeah, you should try and revise by taking this now and doing the rendering part of it. Because you guys haven't worked with HTML files now for a few weeks. So, and soon after you would be doing it quite intensely. So this would be a good way to revise what you had done in JavaScript 1 and 2. Would really highly recommend this particular homework.
Another question.
Yeah.
All text context. Is that what we call an API? Someone else could, if you put it up, someone else could take this.
No, the thing is like API is a very generic term. API doesn't have convention. We will follow a particular convention called the REST convention, and this is not compatible with REST.
Okay.
And we'll be speaking about that quite a bit. Yeah. Gonna pause things here for a bit.